Good evening, friends, and welcome to Plymouth Church, United Church of Christ. We are so honored and grateful to be here tonight to listen to the cries from the wilderness. We're grateful that there will be a teach-in tonight based on the book We Cry Justice. And contributors are here tonight, friends of mine, Aaron Scott, Cedar Monroe, and Erica Williams. We're so delighted for those of you who are here with us in person and those online so that we can be together as the beloved community of which Martin Luther King dreamed and we are still pursuing. And we'll begin this evening with a song. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let sexism turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let racism turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Oh, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
We're in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying.
I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's. I had lost my house. You're welcome to come inside. There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I don't have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff, and they be asking me for, I can't get some.
Now I'm a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide. Why? They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs.
I see poverty in my own community. You know, there's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the street, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice, lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17.
My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps.
This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care, and they canceled my health insurance, and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease, and I'm in the 5th stage. Murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence, and I lost a daughter.
No parent should have, in America, should have to bury their child for lack of medical space. I'm wailing because my children
my God.
are no more.
My God. My God, Kevin.
Well, y'all. Of my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children? No more.
I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Kelly, to the congregation here at Plymouth Church in Seattle. Thank you to Reverend Kevin on tech in the back. My name is Erin Scott. I work for the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice. And I think before we go any further, I'd like us to just, with folks joining us online, folks in the room, just take a minute of silence. There's several folks in this video who have passed. And this was, only from 2018. So I just want to honor, in particular, Venus, as well as Jade and Pamela, who are not with us in body anymore, but they are certainly with us in spirit, and they're why we're here tonight. Amen. So to all of you online, thank you. Folks in the room, thank you. I'm pretty sure we've got folks battling traffic right now. And so hopefully more will trickle in. But my name, like I said, is Erin Scott. I'm with the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice. And we are a co-anchor organization along with Repairs of the Breach for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And this event tonight, Cries in the Wilderness, is going to be a conversation with a few of us who have contributed to the We Cry Justice, Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign book. And I'm going to have my fabulous two co-authors introduce themselves too.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Erica Williams, and yes, I am one of the co-authors of the book.
And I'm Reverend Cedar Monroe, also co-author of the book.
Could you both maybe say a little bit about yourselves beyond being co-authors of the book? How you came to this?
So for the last 10 years, Aaron and I co-founded Chaplains on the Harbor, worked in Grace Harbor County, which was my home county, for the past 10 years, and for the past 13 years, I've done street outreach and chaplaincy. So that's been my entry into the work, primarily working with folks dealing with homelessness, incarceration, and addiction. In a really tiny town on the coast of Washington State. So that brought me to the Poor People's Campaign, and we've been involved for the whole time. I left Chaplains last year, and have pretty much devoted my time to writing since then. So it's kind of...
Yeah. And so just like Reverend Cedar just mentioned that, we have been on a journey with the Poor People's Campaign. I had the honor of working for Repairs of the Breach as the National Social Justice Organizer for 5.5 years. And so was able to see so many different things across this nation. And every time I actually see this film, it does something to me. So in this moment, I think I'm always just kind of reflecting on it because it helps me to always understand that what we are in is just not something we talk about. People often talk about post-traumatic stress. I'm like, what about daily traumatic stress? And so for me, I'm like, it's an everyday triggering thing to know that you live in the richest country in the world, but yet there are many people who don't have a place to lay their head. And so tonight, that's why we had to be here. And we really want to thank Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown and all of her staff for just graciously allowing us to be here because we know that, it's a lot going on and we got to have lights on and we got to have heat and all the things. But we know that there are churches that are yet following the cause of Christ. And so we're thankful for you tonight and we appreciate you. So, yeah, I don't know if I told my story or where I'm from, but just know that I was born in Los Angeles, California, but I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan. So I was California created, but Michigan made. And I am here tonight because I am a follower of that brown-skinned Palestinian Jew. And I just believe that we the people, one day we will win.
So just before we jump into sharing directly from the book, I wanted to give folks a little bit more of an overview of the Cairo Center. You can follow the bouncing ball on the screen. Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice is based at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, which is how I came to work with the Cairo Center first back in 2007. And back then, it had started out as the Poverty Initiative. So since 2004, housed at Union Theological Seminary, engaging with students, with seminary faculty, staff, and then most importantly with grassroots anti-poverty community leaders from across the country. So this includes directly impacted leaders who are organizing for their human rights to housing, to healthcare, to freedom from white supremacist state violence, mass incarceration, unjust immigration systems, the whole host of all these interlocking evils that we're up against. And we're born out of two legacies here. So there's the long legacy of Union Theological, the likes of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, resistor to the Nazi regime in Germany, as well as Miles Horton, founder of the Highlander Center in Tennessee, and others who have come out of Union, particularly speaking a theology of resistance and liberation to resistance to empire and liberation for all people. Union is also where James Cone, may he rest in peace and rise in power, taught for a long time. And then the other legacy that the Cairo Center comes out of is it's a renewal of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign of Martin Luther King. So we're based in New York, but we're made up of lots of leaders across the country and a few international leaders. And we draw on the power of religions and human rights to raise up generations of faith and community leaders who are committed to the unity and organization of the poor as the leading force for building a broad-based movement to end poverty. Emphasis on generations, because we know no one single campaign, no one lifetime, no one generation is going to be the solution. So we're investing in the long-term moral arc here. Our name, the Cairo Center, comes from this Greek word that you can find it in the Bible, especially in the Greek scriptures, the New Testament. We believe we're living in a Kairos moment, so a moment of great change and transition where the old ways, this might sound familiar, of doing things are breaking down and new ones are trying to emerge. And in that moment, in that Kairos moment, that's when decisive action is demanded. So we engage in ongoing collaboration with all different fronts of the struggle for dignity and life, including many of the organizations represented here tonight. So we have obviously the Poor People's Campaign, folks who have worked with repairers of the breach and the Cairo Center, Chaplains on the Harbor, Set It Off movement, our Washington State Poor People's Campaign, as well as all the different state-based campaigns around the country who are joining us on live stream. And this is our mission. Drawing on the power of religions and human rights, the Cairo Center works to raise up generations of religious and community leaders committed to the unity and organization of the poor as the leading social force in the building of a broad transformative movement to end poverty. We are a center for movement and strategy, coordination, and education among the poor across all lines of division. We know there are many lines of division that seek to divide all of us who are much closer to the bottom than we are to the top. And so the work of the Cairo Center, along with Repairers of the Breach, Poor People's Campaign, and our whole network across the country is to build the power that comes with unity from the bottom, to change everything all the way up to the top. And so we are going to do some excerpts, read some excerpts from our We Cry Justice, Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign. But just so you know, if you're here with us, if you're following along online, this is not just an educational event. We're really encouraging folks to contribute, if you're able financially, to the Cairo Center and our mission. So you can do that. We've got some QR codes around the room. You can also go to cairocenter.org and donate. And we would be very, very grateful for your support. So I think we should just hop into our reading, and I'm going to pass it to Reverend Erica Williams first, because you got your book open.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to stand up. I'm a preacher. I don't believe in sitting in no seat, so hopefully I didn't move out the way of the camera. But tonight I will be reading a chapter in the We Cry Justice book, as Aaron named, entitled Jesus Came to Set It Off. Here's a quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I choose to identify with the underprivileged. I choose to identify with the poor. I choose to give my life for the hungry. I choose to give my life for those who have been left out of the sunlight of opportunity. I choose to live for and with those who find themselves seeing life as a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. This is the way I'm going. If it means suffering a little bit, I'm going that way. If it means sacrificing, I'm going that way. If it means dying for them, I'm going that way because I heard a voice saying, do something for others. The passage of scripture that I use for this chapter is Luke 4, beginning of the chapter. The phrase set it off means to start a fight or to get into it. We see in Jesus' inaugural message in Luke 4:18 through 21 that he boldly declares he came to do just that. In this passage, Jesus has a Sankofa moment, a moment of going back to the past to retrieve what is useful for today. He reflects on his own lineage of freedom fighters when he declares he is here to get in on what Isaiah prophesied. The passage in Luke 4:18 through 19 is referring to the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 61 verses 1 through 3, which foretells that a Messiah will come to restore the Israelites from the Babylonian captivity. Announcing the good news is a theme throughout Isaiah. The people have been promised that they will be set free, and Jesus wants his people to know that he has been sent to bring liberation to them and to all people. Jesus was a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew who grew up in Nazareth, a town that was poor and marginalized. Rule in society was dominated by oppression of the peasants' class, as well as by purity codes and patriarchal concepts. Peasant societies were marked by an enormous gulf between rural peasants and urban ruling elites. They were politically oppressive, economically exploitive, and religiously legitimated. The purity ideology central to the structure of the societies was created by the temple elites and generated a class of untouchables and outcasts. The patriarchal structure ensured that men held all the power and that women were excluded. Jesus, who was a peasant himself, saw all of these things happening to his people. He knew that he could not be a chaplain of the empire, but was sent to be a prophet of God, one anointed by God and the people to do the work of love, justice, and liberation. We see Jesus set it off in a nonviolent way during his ministry. He gives sight to blind Bartimaeus. He stops to help a woman who is almost being stoned to death for adultery by telling her accusers that anyone without sin could be the first to throw a stone. And Jesus' final week before being crucified, Jesus goes into the temple. There he sets it off by flipping the tables of the money changers and declaring that God's house is a place of prayer and not a den of thieves. A man considered a nobody set it off by showing radical love and revolutionary compassion and by speaking truth to power. Jesus turned the world right side up. The empire thought it had shut Jesus down by lynching him, but all it did was plant a seed. That seed was to produce a great harvest of freedom fighters, just such as Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Josephine Baker, Septima Clark, and Martin Luther King Jr., and many, many more. We must honor those who have fought the good fight before us, but we must remember that the fight did not stop with them. Each of us is being called to set it off. It does not matter what your pedigree is. God is calling you to stand for truth and justice. And that is why I, Erica Nicole Morse-Williams, have dedicated my life to ending poverty now. When you have over 140 million poor and low-income folks in the richest country in the world, it's time to set it off. And so I plan to set it off in every space and place until every person has an adequate place to stay, food to eat, health care, and all other basic things they deserve. I promise to give all to the right to struggle until I give my breath. Will you join me? And so tonight, that is my question to each of us as we do this teach-in and have this conversation about the cries in the wilderness. We must recognize in this moment that it is not time to be status quo, but it's time to set it off. Come on, somebody. I told y'all earlier I was a preacher, and I like to have some talk back in this place. And so those of you online, let us know you hear what we're saying here. As we say, holla if you hear me. And so tonight, we know that in this country, we continue to get crumbs. And it don't matter if it's a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House. I don't want to start doing politics tonight, but I just got to say it. It don't matter who in the White House, because even those in the White House will never, ever free us. It was always the people that did the work, the people power that brought the work and the change about in this nation. And so that's why the Kairos Center is here, because we recognize that it is a Kairos moment. It is a moment for us to see we cannot work against each other, but we got to work together. And if we work together, baby, we can set it off. I've been saying a long time, like January 6th, 2021, the Rude Boys, Proud Boys, whatever boys you want to name them, they went in and set it off in the Capitol because they believed what they thought was the right thing. But we know the truth. We know the truth. And the truth is that God desires that all children have a right to a tree of life. And so we must set it off to ensure just that. God bless you.
Set it up. Amen to that. So I'm going to read the chapter that I wrote, and I started with a quote from Father Greg Boyle. Here is what we seek, a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. And so this is a reflection on the first couple of chapters of the book of Ruth. The world of the poor is full of the contradictions of trauma and survival. Perhaps nowhere in the Bible is that more evident than in the book of Ruth. It is quite easy, especially in the Christian tradition, to judge the decisions of poor people and to judge the decisions they make to survive. I grew up in a poor majority white community where we were taught, as most poor white people are taught, that when people lose everything, it's their fault. The story in the book of Ruth centers around two women, a widow named Naomi and her daughter-in-law Ruth, who make a series of morally ambiguous decisions in order to survive. In the People's Bible, Wilda Gaffney suggests that Ruth and Orpah, the two Moabite daughters-in-law in the story, were likely kidnapped and forced into marriage based on the Hebrew verbs that were used. They're an unlikely family, moving from place to place in the Fertile Crescent during a period of political unrest and famine. And when Naomi loses her son and her husband and returns to Palestine, Ruth goes with her, an outsider and an immigrant, to the culture and the God of the Hebrews. They create their own family and community of solidarity dedicated to each other's survival in a harsh world. Ruth is determined to keep Naomi and herself housed and fed. She takes advantage of a system of charity in the Hebrew world that allows hungry people to gather leftover grain. When she gains the notice of her mother-in-law's wealthy relative, she thanks him for his kindness, and he ensures she stays safe from predatory men. With the help of her mother-in-law, she approaches this wealthy kinsman while he is drunk at night. The text doesn't say that Ruth attempts to trade sex for security, but you can certainly read it as implying that. This attempt succeeds for Ruth, the immigrant, the poor widow, perhaps even the sex worker, and she becomes the celebrated great-grandmother of King David. As happens so often in the Bible, people with messed up pasts and great struggles become the leaders and founders of movements. As in the time of Ruth, the contemporary world of the poor is also filled with impossible choices. I remember my own sense of deep shame during my own bout with homelessness and the lengths I went in order to hide my struggle. I now work, I wrote this when I was working, as a pastor to people experiencing homelessness in Aberdeen, Washington, a post-industrial logging town on the far edge of the West Coast. Close to 50% of the population is on public assistance. More than 75% of children qualify for free and reduced lunch. And 1 out of 16 people are homeless. And the town carries countless stories of people's savage and dire struggle for survival. Many locals, even pastors, judge people experiencing poverty and homelessness and the addiction that often comes with it. Many neighborhoods, of course, have drug houses and flop houses where 20 or 30 people live off and on, trading whatever they can for space on the floor or a couch or a closet. There's a harsh solidarity on the street where people take care of each other, but they also fight each other for every scrap of food or clothes and every pair of Jordans. The young women I know on the street believe that there are more women than men that are homeless. Women are less likely to inherit or own property, less likely to be on a lease, and usually more dependent on relationships to survive and for protection. The women from Aberdeen's streets have seen hell. They have tried to revive friends who have overdosed. They have lost loved ones in front of their eyes. They've nursed loved ones in muddy tents and vehicles without access to decent medical care. I don't think I know a woman who has not been raped or assaulted, and I know very few women who have not done time for poverty-related crimes. In the middle of a daily struggle to survive, I have found extraordinary courage. I've seen young people care for each other in tents or on the banks of a river. I have seen people go out of their way to make sure an elder survives the night or gets their next meal. Even when a local resident throws explosives at their tent, which has happened multiple times, or city officials call them a public nuisance, which I think they do every single time they meet, they find the strength to go on. The women I know survive, like Ruth did. They survive despite lack of health care, lack of treatment, constant criminalization, and the hunger and cold and deep trauma. They are my heroes. And several of the women that I was thinking of when I wrote this were featured in the video that you watched earlier. And so this is to them and to all those that we've lost, so many over the years in the struggle for just basic human rights and basic needs being met all over this country.
When women's rights are under attack, what do? Stand up, fight.
Back.
When women's rights are under attack, what do?
Stand up, fight.
Hey, it's a teach-in. We do chat. Come on. Hey.
Yes. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Reverend Erica. Thank you, Reverend Cedar. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm going to read one of the chapters I wrote in We Cry Justice. And the cool thing about this book is you don't have to be churchy to read it, but you can be. There's each chapter is paired with a passage of scripture. And so it's really, really handy if you are a leader of a faith community, lay leader, clergy leader, if you want to just do your own book group at home. This can be read on its own, or you can read it. You can do your weekly evening Bible study with it. I think it's best done in groups because you get to hear all the different stories about how people are connecting to these stories. You always find out about somebody you didn't know who also spent 6 months sleeping in their car. So worth getting a copy. It's $20 online, kairoscenter.org. So the chapter I'm going to read from is called Same Sin, Different Day, and it is paired. It's paired with Isaiah 5 verses 8 through 10. I'm going to read that because it's short. Woe to you who add house to house and join field to field, till no space is left and you live alone in the land. The Lord Almighty has declared in my hearing, surely the great houses will become desolate, the fine mansions left without occupants. A 10-acre vineyard will produce only a bath of wine, an omer of seed will yield only an ephah of grain. and I also paired it with another scripture written by a young man named Michael. This is a poem he wrote when the city of Aberdeen swept his encampment. He wrote, "They may take my home, they may scatter my belongings, but they will surely burn in hell. For whoever is no man's keeper is no man at all, but a beast, a tool of the devil." In Aberdeen, Washington, the Public Works Department demolished the city's largest homeless encampment. While there's plenty of vitriol toward unhoused people in Aberdeen and nationwide, an encampment sweep is the kind of brutality that city officials are good at making sound mundane. Their rhetoric gets couched in terms of public safety or public nuisance or taxpayer concerns. It's a big headache for the mayor. It's a real eyesore that somebody's got to clean up. We got to keep attracting tourists, blah, blah, blah. The boringness of that rhetoric intentionally hides the violence. What is the demolition of a homeless camp like? To the mayor, it's a PR stunt in an election year. To the police chief, it's a potential publicity nightmare. To the city attorney, it's a pain in the rear. To local property and business owners, it's a long-awaited cause for celebration. To the poor, it is an apocalypse. It is exile. It is an act of war. It is 14 police cars pulling up to a small string of plywood shacks and tents just to serve the eviction notices. It is bulldozers trying to move in on structures while people are still sleeping inside them. It is watching the homestead you built with your own hands out of the scraps and garbage other people threw away be snatched up and crushed by a roaring excavator against your will with no other place to turn in the richest country on earth. Poor people are not the problem. A society that isn't even satisfied with poor people living in shacks, but must also relentlessly attack and displace them, is the problem. In recognizing the authority of poor people, we have to listen to poor people. We have to hear homeless folks' firsthand accounts of how our cities are investing in expensive militarization directed against them instead of investing in the things that could save lives, like affordable housing and healthcare. I wonder what Isaiah would say if he stood at that camp on the banks of the Chehalis River, surrounded by cop cars, construction equipment, and weeping, cussing homeless people. I think Isaiah would say, same sin, different day. Isaiah might sound a bit like the writer of the poem at the beginning of this chapter, one of the displaced residents of the Aberdeen encampment after he watched the city bulldoze his small cabin. But Isaiah might also say that if we're to have any hope of eventually turning things around and rebuilding from the ashes, we will find it among people who are already figuring out how to survive the apocalypse every single day. Chaplains on the Harbor, where Cedar and I worked, is a mission station of the Episcopal Church and eventually participated in 2 federal lawsuits against the city of Aberdeen for its treatment of homeless people. And won twice. Reverend Cedar Monroe, who you just heard, stood as a plaintiff alongside 10 homeless residents of the camp themselves. And though the original camp was demolished, the plaintiffs, breaking new legal ground and precedent, won some small damages and temporarily a new city-funded campsite. They set federal precedent with this victory, even as their local struggle continues to be dire. And I'm going to read, Cedar, I'm going to read your statement from that first lawsuit. Maybe you should read it since you're here. All right. I didn't say this. Cedar said this. I am a priest. I've been pastoring the people in this camp for 5 years. I do everything from drive people to the hospital, to prayer, to taking people to social service appointments, to performing last rites when people die here. I have continued to visit people, even though I have been denied a permit by the mayor, and am petitioning the court to prevent the city from arresting me for continuing to do so. Homeless people have a constitutionally protected right to freedom of religious expression. I have a constitutionally protected right to my freedom of religious expression, which includes serving the poor and the sick and the hungry. The city's actions are a clear attempt to isolate, marginalize, and further criminalize people who have already been pushed to the edge of existence in this community. I consider it my duty as an American citizen and my vocation as a priest to stand against this. Same sin, different day. Encampment after encampment raised, while the rich add house to house, as Isaiah says. But with each day also comes the bravery, resourcefulness, and faithfulness of those who refuse the bulldozer and the wicked march of oblivion, with God on their side.
Fight poverty.
Not the poor.
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 Woo. Y'all, let's take a moment. This book is, if you don't have it, and not just saying because we are authors, like every time I engage this book, it's like it does something else. Like it just, I'm full right now. And so I know we had a whole program, but we going with the spirit. I felt that. So Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown, the saints and the ancestors are saying we need to hear from you because you might not be a contributing author in this version of the book, because I believe we're going to have some more versions. I hope Reverend Lee is listening. I believe it's going to be more. And in the next one, the Right Reverend Dr. Kelly J. Brown of Seattle, Washington will be in it, because we do know that you do this in Seattle, where you got two of the richest folk in the world that live here, but you got kinfolk sleeping in RVs and under bridges all around Seattle. Reverend Doctor, talk to us. Give us some feedback of all this.
I'm so grateful and so proud and so full, so thankful for the testimonies and the witness that you represent tonight. I'm grateful too because we are sitting in the city that was the first official city of compassion in the world. Did you know that? Seattle, Washington. It is still considered a city of compassion, though we do not see it. We certainly don't see it in the fact that there are many people who are embarrassed by the tents that line our streets. There are people who are embarrassed by the RVs and cars. They're not worried about the people who are living in them, but they are embarrassed by the sight that this beautiful city that once relied on its tourism is turning because of the poverty that has come to the front. They weren't worried about it when it was under a rug or behind the scenes, but now that it's out in people's faces, they are worried. There are people who are business owners who have named Seattle's downtown as going to pot. They are saying that perhaps they need to figure out how to carry their business somewhere else that is perhaps more clean, where the police are doing a better job of keeping away poverty. But somehow, friends, I'm just convinced that this church is staying put, not simply because we've been here for 153 years, but because we are learning how to be church again, which means that we are doing our level best to be here, not just for ourselves. This isn't about the insularity of church that, hey, if churches are going away, and it's only because it's about the adding to of house after house from the scripture that you lifted up, so be it. That needs to go away. But if in fact this is about a revival of what the early church was supposed to be about, which is where we imagine that there could be licks of fire over the head of every person, regardless of how much money they had, regardless of their gender identity or expression, regardless of who they loved or how they loved, regardless of who they were, and even because of who they were, the licks of fire were over them and they were named church. So that's why we are here, and that's why I'm here. I'm a Black caucus in a dominant culture church. And I'm here because I know that there's something in the DNA of this place that says we're supposed to be here so that we can do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. I know that we're here because we truly believe that it is Kairos time, that time is of the essence, that we are supposed to be in our lifetime changing the state of this place. That if there is a church and we're not impacting what's around us, then we need to go home and shut it down. We need to look around this city downtown and see how there is not one bench because they're afraid someone will go to sleep on it. Look for somewhere to use the restroom. And so you're saying you're talking about tourists. What if they are disabled and need somewhere to sit down? Oh, well, because you have been so concerned about, and let's get it straight. We're not just trying to push the poor away, the low-wage person away, those people experiencing homelessness away. We're not just trying to push away people who are trans and non-binary. We're not just trying to dismiss them. We're trying to say, just go somewhere and die. Just die. Because what we do is on the first Wednesday of every month, there are some people called Women in Black who go stand in front of the city council here in Seattle, or the city hall in Seattle, and stand there as witness for those people who have died. Because when you have no housing, that means you will die. And I'm not saying can or may, I'm saying will. Same sin, different day. So they ask, why do you have a prayer of confession? That's because we're standing in sin, and churches don't want to use that word anymore because it's not in fashion, it's not trendy. But it is a sin for us to know that there are people who are living in uninhabitable places trying to keep their heads together. Friends, there are people who are driven to addiction because they can't get their package on time, because they don't have the shoes they think they want. When you are living in a place that is uninhabitable and you can't do anything about it because you have been disempowered to the place that your child is there, you got to leave your the walker, the carriage on the side of the road because you can't get it up the embankment, and you have to take your child out of that to go into the encampment to sleep. What do you think people are doing? But the city of Seattle is trying to point to the needles that are coming out of this encampment rather than the reason that people are driven to that kind of addiction and substance use. Somehow, friends, we just need to say that we are standing in sin. And that we are immoral people. Listen, we're in the midst of Ramadan. I'm standing with my Muslim siblings because they are immoral people. Well, I'm standing with Jewish siblings. They are immoral people. This is about the moral fusion that this movement is calling us to. We have to be people, whether you're agnostic or atheist, we have to be a moral people here and say that we can turn this around today. In this Sojourner Truth's Women's History Month, we need to remember what she said at the end of her famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" That we can turn this world aright. We have to believe that we have the energy. If we have the ruah, the breath in our lungs, we can still do this thing. And it's about a campaign, but it's about a movement, friends. So I am hoping that you will join with these friends, with me, with this church, with people all over, with the church that ends up in encampment, with the scripture that you heard, amen, the contemporary voice that we lift up all the time. We're trying to break your minds open to say that the scripture that's in the canon is only a small piece of the scripture that has been written and has been spoken, that has been walked by people who have to walk the streets because there's no place to be. That is scripture that is going forth every day. And so I pray that we will learn how to be together. I pray that we will not cause anyone to die because of our inability to know that we are siblings with folks that we want to push away. I hope that we can find a way to be beloved community. I hope that we won't build another house in Seattle without knowing that we should be building housing for those, the least, the last, the most vulnerable, the disenfranchised, those who are marginalized. We must do it. Please know that we are here in the downtown Seattle, where there are many buildings that are being built, but we still do not have one unit for low-income housing in all of downtown Seattle. And guess how they did it? They made a little loophole, friends, saying that, yeah, build the housing, but if you can't figure out how to do low-income housing, put the money that you would have put towards that into a pot. Friends, this has been happening for years. The pot is full, but there are no units being built for low-income folks and folks experiencing poverty. So I'm here at 50 years old, knowing that before I turn 75, I want to see a change in this world. Knowing that I'm going to join with you in every way that I can, because we have to do something together. We're past thoughts and prayers, friends. We're way past saying and turning the station to some entertainment. We're past all of that. It's time to get your feet on the grind and let's get to work. For you and I, we are the change that we have been waiting for.
Yay! No justice!
No peace.
No justice!
No peace.
No justice!
No peace.
Come on, friends. God bless us. Somebody's hurting my people, and it's gone on far too long. I know that it's gone on. I know that it's gone on. Oh, somebody is hurting my people, and it's gone on for too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody is hurting the children, and it's gone on far too long. I know that it's gone on. I know that it's gone on. Oh, somebody is hurting the children, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. No, we won't be, and we won't be silent anymore. No, we won't be silent. We won't be silent anymore. Yes.
I don't know why you hand me the microphone. I don't have anything to say. I think we might as well back it up. But I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be here. Well, we're gonna check and see if we got questions online. If you are with us on the live stream, no questions. So we've got some time for Q&A. And I don't know, or just comments, thoughts, things on your heart. That can include our authors, folks in the room, folks online.
Nothing at the time.
Reverend Cedar? Nothing. Nothing.
I want for the authors, because one of the things that I know is that we are in the state we're in because of a lack of creativity. We simply have not realized that the creation story wasn't about solidifying, about Rhea being creating folk. Come on, friends. But it was truly about the fact that God created, and so can we. And so for me, what I would love for you to respond to is, we are in this forest and we are trees, right? And so sometimes we need to have a clearing so we can see and dreamcast what shall be. And I would love to hear your vision of one small thing, one big thing that you imagine can happen in this lifetime. Because that's where it begins for me. I knew that I could go forward and be a minister because I was the student of a woman named Reverend Dr. Flora Wilson Bridges at Spelman College. Until that moment, I had never known that I could be a woman pastor or a Black woman pastor. And so if I can see it, I can be it. We're going to claim that back from folks who don't need to be named in this moment. But I would love to hear your vision and your dreaming about one small thing you imagine can happen that we can be a part of.
All right. I couldn't get out of it. I mean, so I'm an organizer. I'm not clergy. I'm an organizer, and we got to organize different. We got to organize it. I mean, I think you got to do everything different. You do church different, all of it different. But even in the most progressive, like XYZ, saying all the right words, like attending all the right events, checking off all the right boxes, circles, like what's the point of being very pure and very righteous in your practice if you are alone, like, or if your circle is so small that, like, random person off the street in badly need of the world you're talking about, like, is looking to engage with you, and they don't even understand what you're saying, because it's not actually for them. Like, you're creating a movement that is not big enough to hold everybody. I think the Poor People's Campaign, the work of the Cairo Center, Repairs of the Breach, all of the organizations that are part of this network is really important because we're trying to build that thing. But even we are not big enough. There's, what the slide said, like 140 million poor and low-income people in this country. 140 million. Like, I think until our movement is at least like half that number strong, we are not reaching the folks we need to be reaching. And so when you look at all these maps of the United States, especially around like election seasons, right? And you look at these huge swaths of the country that are red voting, right? Like and these are like really big stretches of the country, and some really, really horrifying policies and candidates, and people winning elections are really entrenched there. But I think we have to keep in mind with our creativity, all of our creativity, and all of our belief in the power of the transformation of God, or just the transformation that's possible in this world period. Like, we have to know what's actually happening in those places, because the policies dictated from the top are not in honor of the lives of most of the people who are there. Like, there's huge rates of disenfranchisement, repression, vigilantism, criminalization, like in, towns that I think would really rather see themselves on this like very cute postcard of like small town Americana is like, and that's like until we have movements that are invested in going everywhere strategically, right? It's not everybody's job to go to Aberdeen, Washington, but it was our job. It's a lot of people's, like, there is a lot of people to be won. A lot of people to be won. So that would be mine.
Thank you. Okay.
I mean, I think I could say a lot of different things, but I think the one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, just kind of watching the trajectory of the last few years, is I think one of the things we have to recognize in like changing the way that we organize is that the system we're up against isn't defective, doesn't need a little bit of fixing. It is fundamentally opposed to life. Right? So racialized capitalism, colonialism, this country was built on colonialism and genocide. It was built on racialized capitalism and slavery. It was built on this whole country was built on all of these things. And I think we think of ourselves as a democracy. We think of ourselves as, well, we are doing these things together, and we're not. There's no we. Right? Those in power, the corporate interests in power, the money in power, right? All of the things that are driving this nation, right, have been driving them from the beginning. There's no little fix. There's no little Band-Aid. There's no nicer version, right? The system itself has to end if we are going to survive, right? If the earth is going to survive, if any of us are going to survive. And so sometimes I think we get very overwhelmed, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the level of suffering and poverty that we, but I think to envision change, we have to realize just how big the system is, but also that we can build something different, right? This isn't actually our system, right? This isn't actually us, right? We could build something different. And I know that'll take a huge amount of organizing, like Aaron was saying, but I think for me, it's been helpful to think in terms, in those global terms, and also to think in terms of the fact that communities all over the world have resisted this system and have resisted it successfully. Right. So, and we're actually not alone. Poor people in the United States, we feel, I come from a community that's a little tiny isolated community in the middle of nowhere, and it can feel like, everybody's poor, everybody's struggling, everybody's told that they're not enough. Right. And it can feel very isolating. It can feel like, you're all alone. And that's not the case, actually. Right. All over the world, poor people are resisting, and all over the world, poor people are succeeding, because there is, in the end, a whole lot more of us than there are of them. And so, I think that gives me some hope. It's also staggeringly terrifying, but but it gives me some hope as well. And I don't know, maybe one of the ways we can organize is look at each other as companions in struggle, regardless of who we are, and stop listening, right, to the mayors and city councils that are so desperate to create tourist centers, and because that's the way you succeed in capitalism, right? That's the way that people in power can succeed, but that's not the way that we're going to succeed, right? And realizing that we need to stop listening to those messages, and we need to stop thinking the way we're told to think, and start thinking differently, and start listening to other poor people all over the country and all over the world who are doing things differently.
That's it. Powerful. And I'm so grateful for that question, Reverend Brown, because I think that's the thing that we must do in this moment is we can't keep talking about it. Right. And I'm, grateful for this space tonight, because this is allowing us. And, for me, my soul is on fire tonight. So y'all done stirred these grits real good tonight, because I'm ready to run on. I mean that. And so I know the Spirit does all things in the way that the Spirit will have it. And so I'm grateful for this space that has been made tonight, this sacred space. But as you ask, what are we going to do? What's our vision? Because it's enough talking. We're living in a nonprofit industrial complex, and we're living in a panel industrial complex, because everybody is having a panel about something. And I'm like, but ain't nobody doing nothing. I often say so many folk woke, but ain't out the bed. They still in the bed, still tossing and turning, but ain't up doing nothing. And so I say that with all humility and love, because I'm saying it like we gonna keep talking and talking, and while we talking, them jokers on the other side is walking. That's exactly right. They walking into the city halls. They walking into the county commissioners. They walking into governors and mayors. They are running these states, as you named, Aaron. Like, this is what's happening. And so I say all that just because I'm like, I really hope that folks are hearing tonight, like, we can't keep talking. This is not the moment. And so for me, I got my assignment. The Spirit of the Ancestors said, as I said in my chapter, it's time to set it off. And so in 2013, God and the ancestors gave the vision because as the Combahee River Collective says, until Black women are free, none of us are free. And Fannie Lou Hamer, she said it, until I am free. None of us are free. And so the Spirit gave me the movie Set It Off that came out in 1996 that starred Queen Latifah, Jada Pinkett Smith, Kimberly Elise, and Vivica Fox. And this movie showed the lives of poor Black women in America. Because I got to tell you that in America, we are living in a time of American exceptionalism where we think that Black folk have arrived because we got a few in the White House. We got a few in the Supreme Court. It shouldn't have took us that long to get there, for one, but ultimately it is not reflective of how Black women are actually living in this country. Black women in this country are living like those women in the movie Set It Off, like our beloved sister and ancestor now, Pamela Rush, in this film, who she lived in a mobile home she paid 4 times the amount for. She had raw sewage in her front yard. Her and her children, as she said in the film, had to use CPAPs at night to sleep because of the breathing, all of the mold in their home. And so Pamela died in 2020, and I often say she didn't die because of COVID. That was the thing that they say killed her, but it was white supremacy. It was capitalism. It was colonialism. It was racism that made Pamela die. And so I often say Pamela's life, because she was the same age as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, so their stories are indicative of what Dr. King said, there are 2 Americas. And even amongst Black women, there are 2 Americas. And so y'all don't put me out because I love us as Black folk. I'm not doing no hierarchy, but what I am saying is we're forgetting about the poor. Come on now. We talk a lot about in a lot of spaces because the movie Wait and Exhale came out in 1995. Right. Set It Off came out in 1996. Right. And the 2 movies were received differently because one movie showed upper class Black women and Set It Off showcased poor Black women. Right. So all in all, I done went all into a whole nother thing, but ultimately Set It Off movement is what the ancestors have given to me. And so we are bringing this movement forward because we have to see that we have got to end the dehumanization, the death dealing, and destruction of poor Black women in America and in the global South, because it's not just here. We got to know that the U.S. is the imperialist to the world. And so what we do here dictates what happens in a lot of other countries. And so for me, my heart lives with Black women. That includes trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming. I don't matter, because what I've been saying, and Aaron always hear me say this, during the 2020 uprisings, when George Floyd was murdered, when Breonna Taylor was murdered, when Ahmaud Arbery, let me rephrase that, when they were lynched, yes, they did not say anything, the public, say anything about Nina Pop, a Black trans woman that was stabbed to death, brutally killed in Missouri during the same time. Because to some folks, only some Black lives matter. And so for me, God has said to me that you must go and make sure that my daughters have what they need. And it's not about me going to them. Ella Baker says that strong people don't need strong leaders. They only need to be given a light and they'll find their way. And so for me, God has given me the gifts, and I believe that strongly, of organizing and also as being a faith leader. And so God said, go get them Reverend Dr. Kelly Browns and go get them other Black clergy and healers and folks across the country. And we're going to come together and build a poor people's campaign for poor Black women. That is still a part of the PPC. We all connected because we know who our enemy is. But we got a caucus in this moment because we got to get our sisters what they need, because Black women in this country are still the lowest paid workers in this nation. And I'm done. My grandmother died in 2016. She was a domestic worker for 31 years. I said she had 3 knee surgeries, but only 2 knees because she scrubbed floors. She mopped floors. She was cooking and doing everything for other folks. But when she died, she couldn't even pay for her own funeral because she didn't have enough money because she didn't make a living wage. So Set It Off is for women like my grandma and her best friend, Aunt Alma Houston, and so many other Black women across this nation that have not been given the right to the tree of life. And so how we going to do this? This movement is going to be built by helping to heal the spirit, helping to heal the situation, and helping to heal the system. I'm like you, see, I don't feel like we need to heal the system. That just needs to be abolished because we need to go on home. But ultimately, we know that we must do something in this moment to try to make sure we can stop all of of the daily traumatic stresses that are happening. And so how we're going to heal the spirit is during spiritual care. That's why I'm going to call on all the elders, the leaders, the spirit leaders all over this land to help us to heal our spirits, because we know when our ancestors were enslaved, they sought to break their spirits, but to keep their bodies intact so that they could do labor. And so we know these evils seek every day to kill our spirits. So we're going to work on that. The second thing is to heal the situation. We will do projects of survival. That's what Chaplains on the Harbor has been a leader in this nation for showing us how do we make a way out of no way for ourselves, because ain't nobody gonna come save us. So how do we get resources to our communities and make sure that people have what they need? So that will be healing the situation. And the last thing is healing the system. Like I said, don't want to heal it, but we're gonna do what we do, and we're gonna do that through organizing and advocacy. Things like we're doing tonight to let folks know. Dr. King always said, I don't want to give a coin to a beggar. I want to know the system that created a beggar. And so when we are doing this work of Project Survivals, letting folks know this ain't the way it's supposed to be, baby. Ain't nothing you did wrong. That's why we put that sign right there up on the monitor so you can see it. Fight poverty and not the poor. And so we must build power, like Fannie Lou Hamer said, that must not be denied. And so we're going to do that on a local level. We starting in November of this year. Let me be clear. We're going to launch in Detroit this year. And then we're going to go around the country next year and do a truth commissions and have poor black women come and tell the story. And so when we do that, we're going to bring together a movement. So it's in the works. So y'all just be on the lookout. Reverend Kelly going to be involved. So just know that Plymouth UCC is already on the name list. And so we are definitely ready to set it off, because as I said earlier, it's done for talking. That's right. It's time out for talking. I don't want no more conversations with no politicians, because I keep saying the reason why we got so many pathetic politicians is because we don't have enough prophetic preachers in the public square. Exactly right. And so I'm here, and I know Reverend Kelly here. I know Cedar here. I know Reverend Aaron here. He'll say I ain't no Reverend, but he is a Reverend. And Reverend Aaron is here, and Reverend Emily is here, and Reverend Kevin is here. And you sure got Prophet Moses in the house tonight. We are going to be the ones that will say to this nation, you've done enough. That's right. Time out. Time out. It's time for us to take what belongs to us. And so that's where we're going, Pastor.
All right.
Jesus, I'm stirred.
Listen.
I'm stirred.
And that's what it takes. We keep thinking it takes a lot of people. Folks are shaking in their boots because church numbers are falling and buildings are empty and all that stuff. I'm just like, this is just revival. That's what it looks like. This is what it looks like. So all it takes is who we have here.
That's exactly right. That's right.
You know, Harriet, I watched that movie. Harriet Tubman said, while y'all trying to figure this thing out, I'm going to go save some more people. So I just called the revival of the Underground Railroad today. And we will do what we do until God says otherwise. I am so grateful to you tonight. And for the folks who are online, we are grateful to you for holding it down. Thanks to you, Reverend Kevin Bechtold, who is for being in this place and making sure that we had what we need. And I think, can we just end with a benediction?
We sure can.
All right.
We can sure do that. We can sure do that.
Oh my goodness. I found out from a friend about a benediction that I have used over and over again. It comes from a Bishop Woody White years ago, and it is one of the things that keeps me going. So here now a benediction for us. And now may God torment you. May God keep you before you the faces of the hungry, the lonely, the rejected, and the despised. May the Holy One afflict you with pain for the hurt, the wounded, the oppressed, the abused, the victims of violence. May God grace you with agony, a burning thirst for justice and righteousness. And may God give you courage and strength and compassion to make ours a better world, to make your community a better community, and to make your church a better church. And may you do the best, your best, to make it so. And after you have done your best, may God grant you peace. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, everybody online in particular. Please sign up at kairoscenter.org to receive our emails. We want to be in touch with you. If you were inspired by anything you heard tonight, just know that the Kairos Center, as a co-anchor of the Poor People's Campaign with Repairs of the Breach, has nurtured leaders just like these folks across the country. And you are one of them. So if you haven't been in that role before, get ready, because it's your charge. It's all of our charge. kairoscenter.org. Stay in touch with us, get on the email list. And if you are able, we really are asking folks to contribute financially. When you give to the Kairos Center, you are giving to the leadership of the poor and dispossessed to be nurtured generation across generation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye, everybody.